Am I the a-hole for telling my sister her baby name sounds ridiculous? My 29 female sister, Claire, 34 female, is pregnant with her first child, and I'm genuinely happy for her. She's had a rough couple of years, so it's nice to see her so excited about something. That said, she's taken the excitement to a weird level. She's decided to name her baby something unique, and I think it's borderline cruel. The name she's chosen for her future daughter, Mleighaseranphynnne. Yes, spelled exactly like that. Claire insists it's pronounced Malaya Seraphine, but she's adamant about keeping the creative spelling because normal names are boring and my daughter deserves to stand out. When she told me, I was caught off guard and just blurted out, "Are you serious?" She looked hurt and asked why I didn't like it. So I, probably too bluntly, said, "Because it sounds like a Wi-Fi password." Claire immediately got defensive, saying I was being judgmental and unsupportive, and that no one else had a problem with it. Side note, I later found out our dad laughed out loud when he heard it, but tried to cover it up. I tried to tread carefully, but I told her I thought the spelling was going to make her daughter's life harder than it needed to be. Teachers, doctors, employers, everyone will constantly be mispronouncing it or spelling it wrong. Claire shot back that it's her child, and I don't get a say, and I need to get with the times because kids today have unique names, and no one cares anymore. Here's where things got worse. At a family dinner, Claire brought up the name again, and I made a mistake of saying, "You know you're naming a person, not a fairy in a fantasy novel." She stormed out, and now she's refusing to speak to me unless I apologize for mocking her creativity. My dad is staying out of it, but my stepmom thinks I was wrong to criticize the name and should just let Claire do what she wants. I love my sister, but I can't shake the feeling that she is prioritizing her ego over her baby's future. Am I the a-hole for being honest, or should I have kept my opinion to myself? Now for the top comments. You should look into the subreddit r/tragedy. It's chock full of situations like you're describing. Lol. Oh, not the a-hole by the way. You're trying to save your niece a life of having a store-brand Harry Potter spell for a name. Not as bad as Ray Farty, but heading that way. But still equally horrible as Jacksonville. That poor girl. Not the a-hole. Her child is going to grow up and be an adult in the real world. That name is a no-go for me. I wouldn't continue harping on it, but you're not wrong for being honest. Can you imagine the mocking the kids will come up with? I definitely considered what my kids' names rhymed with, or how they could be twisted into a cruel phrase when naming them. Kids are creatively cruel. My name wasn't terrible, but it sorta rhymed with pizza, so I got that a lot. Next story. Am I the a-hole for giving money set aside for my son to his daughter's mother? My husband and I are fortunate that we were able to not just put our children through college, but also put money aside for their future weddings. As our sons got older, one of them, Frank, told us that he didn't plan on getting married. My husband and I talked about it and decided that when the time came, we would give him money toward a down payment on his first home. We also told our other son that this was an option as well, and he could use the money for either purpose. From ages 20 to 23, Frank dated Nadine. They were pretty serious, and according to Frank, he planned to be with her long term. She was very close with our family and even vacationed with us. Then one day, out of nowhere, he announced that they had broken up. He didn't want to talk about why and refused to talk about her, period. We weren't sure what was going on, but supported him. A few months later, Nadine reached out to me. She asked if I had Frank's new phone number. I was hesitant to give it to her as I wasn't sure if he'd want her to have it. That's when she told me she had recently given birth to Frank's child and couldn't get in contact with him but really needed his help. I didn't give her his number but said I would talk to him and get his consent. When I told Frank the news, he wasn't surprised. He said he knew about the baby. I asked if he knew if it was his and whether Nadine had cheated, or if that was the reason they broke up. He said no, he knew the baby was his and Nadine wasn't the type to cheat. He said he just didn't want to be a father. I asked if he thought she had baby-trapped him, not because I thought she did, but just to understand his attitude. He said no. He believed it was a true accident, but he didn't want a baby. I was in shock. My husband and I didn't raise either of our boys to be this way. I said even if he didn't want to physically be present, he still owed child support. He claimed that no, he wasn't going to pay, and Nadine was too poor to get a lawyer. I told him I was disappointed in him and that he needed to get his act together and be responsible. He was very nonchalant in his refusal. I truly didn't recognize the son in front of me. I ended up meeting with Nadine privately. She looked exhausted. She told me she had been laid off right before finding out she was pregnant and was struggling to find work. She had depleted her savings. On top of that, she was exhausted from caring for the baby. I held the baby and fell in love instantly. I knew we had to help Nadine and my granddaughter. I spoke with some friends and helped Nadine get a job. My husband and I discussed it and decided we would use Frank's wedding/down payment fund to get a good lawyer for her. One of the first things done was getting a DNA test, which proved that yes, the baby was Frank's. With a lawyer, Nadine was able to get child support out of Frank. At the time, Frank didn't know where the money for the lawyer came from. Nadine asked us not to tell him for the time being, and we agreed. This was all a year ago. My husband and I are very active in Nadine and the baby's lives. Nadine is doing much better. She has a new apartment, and the child support has helped her immensely. Frank has barely spoken to us in the time since. He calls us traitors for even wanting to be around Nadine and the baby. He also blames us for her suing him for child support. We've told him that we are very disappointed in him for trying to skip out on his responsibilities and making it so the mother of his child couldn't support their baby. Frank recently came to us and announced he's finally ready to buy his first home. He said he has some money saved up, so combined with what we've put away, he feels he can buy a nice house. We told him that the money isn't there anymore and finally explained why. He became furious. He told us that we had chosen Nadine and the baby over him. We said no, we chose the baby's well-being over him. He has now cut us off completely and says that we have chosen this new family over him. Our other son was supportive of us being in the baby's life, but says we were wrong for using the money Frank always counted on for the baby. While we were once confident in our choice, we now wonder if we went too far. Were we wrong? Ask Frank, if you don't owe any support to your newborn child, why would you expect us to support our grown adult child? Not the a-hole. I never even thought of it this way, but you are absolutely right to frame it this way. Not the a-hole. At the end of the day, Frank doesn't believe that a parent should support their child. That should definitely go for him too. The fact he tried to hide it all from you speaks volumes. He knew you wouldn't support the decision, so he tried to hide your grandchild from you, so he could effectively still extort you for money. Sounds like you're nothing but a savings account to him, to be honest. Next story. Am I the a-hole for strictly following the visitation plan instead of letting my ex have extra time with our son? I, 34 male, have custody of my son, 13. His mother, 33 female, and I broke up when he was 18 months old. We were on good terms at that point and co-parented well. When our son was in second grade, he had a horrific time with his teacher. For whatever reason, his teacher, who I'll call Sam for the sake of the post, singled out my son and treated him terribly. He was a bully. My son had no trouble with his two previous teachers, but this guy always had complaints about my son. He'd sent home notes complaining that our son was annoying because he was too quiet and needed to speak up, stop being quiet, and ask questions when needed. He also said my son got upset a lot in class. Sam would correct my son's homework and mark it wrong when it wasn't. When I reached out to discuss this, he ignored me. I spent a lot of time at the school trying to address this. I tried talking to the teacher, but his attitude toward my son was awful. He even said my son was too old to be crying to daddy about issues with his teacher. My ex was involved at the start, making complaints as well. We spoke to the principal and I requested several times to have my son placed in another classroom, but I was told it wasn't an option. It took far too long for them to agree to move him, and it only happened when other kids confirmed the issues my son brought up. For example, the teacher would go out of his way to embarrass my son by telling him boys are loud and can't be heard and shouldn't sound like babies. He'd always point out when my son got something wrong, even when he didn't, while other kids were corrected privately or on paper. He mocked my son whenever he asked questions, which explains why my son stopped asking questions when needed to. He even called my son names in front of the class. It was heartbreaking to hear how badly he treated my son. At some point during all this, my ex decided that Sam, the man who treated our son like this, would be a good partner for her. She hid a relationship for a while, and then told our son one day when he was with her. She wanted him to join them for a day out, and he became hysterical. There was a lot of discussion, much of it angry because I couldn't understand her decision. She told me I didn't know Sam the man, and that our son and I would need to get over it. She moved him in weeks later and sprung that on our son like it was nothing. This led to our son running away from her house several times. He was having emotional issues and even shut out his therapist, who had been helping him since the issues with Sam began. She refused to give up Sam and insisted they would live together and get married, which they later did. I ended up asking for custody and filing with the courts. It wasn't straightforward or quick, but the court agreed that the strain of living with Sam was not good for my son. I was granted custody, and my ex was given visitation rights. The visitation does not include overnights and explicitly excludes Sam. My ex has not been consistent with visitation. Sometimes she has dragged Sam along, and I've turned them away. She refused to take the time with our son alone. She does see him most of the time, but hasn't given up trying to make our son get over the trauma Sam caused. Sam still dislikes my son, and I'm putting that very mildly. He gives off the vibe that he'd happily bully my son. My ex resents losing custody and being unable to see our son whenever she wants. My son doesn't want to see his mom, but has to if she shows up alone for visitation. The judge recently reinforced this during her failed attempt to get more custody time. My son told the court he'd like to have the choice to say no. She's asked for more visits on several occasions, but I've always stated we need to follow the visitation plan. Recently, she learned her family was spending more time with our son than she was, and she wanted him for her birthday. That wasn't one of her designated days, and I said no. She told me it wasn't right to deny her time and accused me of punishing her for falling in love with Sam. She claimed I was engaging in alienation against Sam. I refused to engage, but told her we needed to follow the court-ordered plan. She said I never say yes to extra time and that I shouldn't be so strict about following the plan because our son needs his mom. I feel like I'm doing the right thing, not just because of the court order, but also because of my son's wishes. However, I'm worried that my disgust for this situation might be clouding my judgment. Am I the a-hole? Now for the top comments. You are not obligated to make exceptions to the custody plan. You can tell your ex that you are not punishing her. You are watching out for your son's best interests. Your son is old enough to refuse visitation with his mom. His opinion and mental/emotional state matter. If she tries to force him, he can call CPS. Not the a-hole. Not the a-hole. You are doing the right thing by defending your son. Incidentally, I don't believe your ex's story for 1 minute. I reckon your ex was seeing Sam before the abuse of your son began, and that's what precipitated it. Either way, she is an awful mother, and I don't blame your son for not wanting to see her. I can't blame him either. The hurt he feels is something she will never fully recognize, but I see it. I'm an internet stranger and cannot understand a mom choosing her child's tormentor as a spouse. The poor kid. Not the a-hole. You keep your son safe. I'm doing everything I can. As a parent, I can't imagine it. I could never put a partner before my child like that. I could never betray my child's trust like that. Last story. Am I the a-hole for refusing to meet my mother after she accused me of being in love with my stepfather? I, 21 female, have always had a good relationship with my mother, 46 female, and that didn't change after my parents divorced for personal reasons. However, things took a turn when my stepfather, 37 male, entered our lives. My mother has always been a bit eccentric, but she was never hurtful, and she always made sure my older sister, 23 female, and I felt loved. That changed when she started dating my stepfather. While I got along with him and he respected my privacy, my mother started acting differently. At first it was subtle comments like, "You two spend a lot of time together," and "You're getting really friendly." I brushed it off, mostly because I didn't think much of it. My stepfather and I only spent time together when I visited my mom. Yes, we joked around, but it was harmless and never inappropriate. Jokes like, "Looking like death today, huh?" We never got physical. We didn't poke each other or have playful touches, because I'm not comfortable with being touched for personal reasons, and he was always respectful of that. As time passed, my mother's comments became more aggressive. I started to distance myself from both of them to avoid ruining the good relationship we had, though I didn't know what I was doing wrong. One day, my mother invited me over for coffee and cake, and during our conversation, she suddenly asked if I had feelings for my stepfather. I was caught off guard, shocked, and mostly confused. I told her no, and asked why she thought that. She said it was because we were too close to just be friends, and she noticed the way he looked at me. I reassured her that, while we got along well, I only saw him as a father figure and didn't feel anything romantic toward him. I also reminded her that she'd always wanted us to get along. But then she got angry, accusing me of lying and insisting she wasn't blind. The conversation escalated, and I stood up, telling her that the whole thing was ridiculous. I left, and she began texting me things like, "I can't believe my own daughter would betray me," among other hurtful things. I didn't respond and talked to my older sister about it. She advised me not to engage with our mother for a while, saying that she thought our mom was acting completely out of character. I took her advice and stopped visiting and talking to my mother. It's been 2 months of no contact, and today I received a message from her asking if we could meet up to talk about what happened. I'm torn, because on one hand, I don't really want to meet her after everything that's happened, but on the other hand, I'd like to resolve things and hear her side. Am I the a-hole for not wanting to meet her? What a pathetic woman, not the a-hole. Maybe she shouldn't date if she gets this ridiculous. I wouldn't meet her yet. I doubt she is suddenly cured of her madness. Let her feel the consequences for much longer than this, or she will likely do this again. She is the one who betrayed you, not the other way around. Not the a-hole. I do wonder if your stepfather had an eye for you, and your mom noticed and thought you reciprocated those thoughts. But it's a heavy accusation to put on someone with zero evidence. I wouldn't meet up with your mom after that accusation, and it could also be an insecurity for her, marrying someone who's a decade younger than her. Thanks for your perspective. I've thought about that possibility too. But honestly, my stepfather has never given me any reason to think he had inappropriate intentions. He's always respected my boundaries, and our interactions have been harmless. I feel like my mom's accusations are more about her insecurities than anything else, especially with the age difference between them, as you mentioned. It's just really hurtful that she jumped to such a heavy accusation without evidence, or even talking to me properly about it. I agree that meeting her right now feels like a bad idea, but part of me still wants to resolve things. I just don't know if she's ready to approach this maturely yet.